Hey, okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to our session, our first session in the month of the Jewish Culture Month. Um, and Rabbi Isaac, who's taking it off, and he's he's bringing to us spirituality in everyday life. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about him. To me, I look very musty. Do I look musty to everyone else? Yeah. Oh dear. Right, give us a minute. Getting better.
Oh, yes.
Getting better. Okay. One day I'll buy a new laptop. Okay, so I'm Jane Ansell. Um, yes, I'm also related to Rabbi Isaac. Um, I'm the vice chair of the Jewish Cultural Centre. I'm delighted to welcome you all to another Learning for All, where we get a person with their own expertise to introduce us to a topic and to help us relate it to our everyday lives. So there could be nothing sort of more directly related than trying to think about our spirituality. Rabbi Isaac, we claim him both in Scotland and he's also claimed in Jerusalem these days. He's passionate about his teaching, which has a Kabbalistic approach, which you'll all see during this session. And Rabbi Isaac he's a teacher, he's a teacher and a rabbi. He's presently also developing sleep services in Israel. And he has a very eclectic background, having got his smicha from Mizrahi and his six or 8 years of learning, Isaac.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that at the Mia. So maybe with no more ado, I'm going to go over to him and very welcome and thank you so much for doing this for us.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks so much for the kind words. I am very privileged to speak both back to my home country, my home city, evidently my home dining room from one of the screens over here, and as well evidently around the world. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm going to begin. I just want to let you know in terms of my sessions, whatever helps you learn. If you want to eat during the session, you can do that. If you want to, you're encouraged to ask questions during the session. The sages say, "Lo abaishan lamed." The person who's shy isn't going to be able to learn. So don't be shy. Speak up, be bold, and that's the way that learning can go. And for that matter, to prove it to you that I like questions in my session, I'm going to ask you one to start off. Okay, I'm going to do something a little dangerous, which is I'm going to share my desktop backgrounds with you. And I just have to minimize, of course, all these windows to show you this picture. Can you see this picture? Okay, so it's a little dangerous, but I'm a dangerous kind of person, so that's how we like to start off. Who is this man in the middle of the picture? Does anyone know who this is? Anyone want to shout out a guess? Okay, can anyone tell what his job is at least during in this photograph, roughly? Yeah,
A
Jillian.
consultant?
Sort of, yeah, yeah. Any Jillian, did you want to say something as well?
He's a radiologist, or he's
Oh,
uh,
yeah. I would have thought so too. Actually,
or
he's yeah. Go on.
I don't know. He might be a forensic scientist because it's a skull. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So it's interesting. He's a psychiatrist actually. But I think both. I would have guessed both of those professions as well. But this is a figure who's the head of the psychiatry department in his hospital. He is also known uh, to many others as Rabbi Twersky, Rabbi Avram J. Twersky. And I just want to show you one more picture. Uh, but if you ever, don't worry, you can Google him. because you will find that basically there's no one who really looked more rabbinic, a Hasidic rabbi than Rabbi Twersky, very wise. Only was cognizant. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. Actually, he lived near Jillian. In Jerusalem, and he passed away, unfortunately, of COVID during the pandemic. He was older, but he was this wise, like if you thought of the idea of a sage, like that's who you would think of, this like wise old Hasidic man. And he wrote, I think, over 100 books over the course of his life. But here he is in his profession as a psychiatrist. And to the extent, not just as a little thing, like he was the head of the psychiatry department in the hospital. And this is something I've been trying to grapple with. How can you be Rabbi Twersky and also be Dr. Twersky at the same time? How can you do that? So this is something that I've been thinking about as well. As mentioned, I was in learning full-time Torah learning for many years, and I do lots of rabbinic work. But I'm now embarking on a much harder task, which is to do normal work. I always did some normal work along the way, but I'm having much more of an emphasis on that as well in terms of therapy with a sleep speciality and developing services to that effect. And this is the person I've been looking to at this time and saying, how did he do that? How did he take himself, who was a man of spirituality, and live a genuine life of spirituality right here in the physical world, dealing with very, very practical everyday things from, his profession in medicine. But if you are the head of a department, you're involved in management, you're working with people. And then all these very, very practical worldly things. How did he manage to do those two things at the same time? So that's something that I want to try and think about together today, and hopefully we can try and discover possibly some answers to that today. So with that, I'm going to open up a couple of sources for us to just start off with. So we'll do a new share. Check, can people see this screen over here? Okay, so we're just looking at the first source over here right now. Just making sure I can see everyone at the same time. Perfect. Okay, so we are dealing with this first source over here right now. And I wanted to draw people's attention to a verse, which is from Isaiah, from Yeshayahu, but it's also familiar to a lot of us from the liturgy. It comes up in what's called the Kedushah prayer, but one of the highest prayers that the prayer service gets to. And the verse from the Tanakh, which it's drawn from the Bible, says as follows: "V'kara ze al ze v'amar," they, i.e. the angels, called out to each other, saying as follows: "Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh, Hashem Tzevakot." Holy, holy, holy is the God of legions, or the God of armies, something like that. Melo chol haaretz kavodo. The whole world is filled with His glory. So this is a verse. Kadosh, 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 Hashem Tzevakot v'lo chol haaretz kavodo. People may have heard of this if you're familiar with the synagogue service. We do even actions which relate to this. When we say Kadosh, we go up on our tiptoes as if to emulate the angels. We say Kadosh, and so we go up on our tiptoes 3 times as if we're trying to climb, the levels of spirituality to try and emulate the angels over there. Okay, but the bottom line is, what does this verse actually mean? You have two things over here. 2 completely different kinds of spirituality which are being mentioned over here, and usually we kind of just flash them all into one. There's 2 things. One thing is called Kedushah, which you can translate as holiness. That's one kind of spirituality. But there's also something called Kavod Hashem, the glory of God. And so, when you are going through a prayer service, when you are skimming through the scripture, you would think it's good, it's all good, it's all spirituality. God is great. That's what you kind of think. But that is an entry level understanding of what's going on over here. There are 2 very different descriptors over here of God and of spirituality. So what indeed are the difference between these two things? What is Kedushah, holiness, and what is Kavod, the glory of God? What are these two things? So Kedushah, holiness, means what I think most people associate with religion or spirituality, which means to be above, means to be removed. The sages say, well, there's a mitzvah in the Torah which says, Kedoshim to you, you should be holy. What does that mean, to be holy? The sages say, Prushim to you, you should be removed. You should, even those things which are technically okay to do, but you probably shouldn't do them, don't do those either. When you don't do, it's just an interesting aside, you say like, maybe there's someone who's like very religious, but they like manage to get around, loopholes here and there, and maybe they're not so honest with this and not so honest with that. So the truth is they're not so religious. But what mitzvah are they transgressing? Kedoshim to you, they're not being holy. Because even if something is technically permitted, it's actually not permitted because there's a mitzvah to be holy, and that's not holy. So there's no such thing really as a person who's religious but there's no such thing. They just are also struggling with religion like anyone else. But that's one thing. So what does it mean that God is holy? So it means that God is above, God is spiritual, God is infinite. Indeed, it's the Hashem Tzavakot, the God of armies, legions, hosts. As I think it was translated in the Siddur which I had growing up. It's sort of referenced, simple understanding is a reference to the angels. The army of God may mean one other thing in another place in Tanakh, as far as I know, but simple understanding is it means he's the God of the angels. So he's the God of the angels in as much as he is dealing with the realm of spirituality. He's the God who's in heaven and he's dealing with spirituality. So that's called holiness. God is holy. So far, so good. I think this is what most of us are familiar with. This is what most of us would think, the first thing that we would think of when we want to think of God. However, and what would be the characteristic of a person, by the way, who would try and attain holiness? As you said, they'd be removing themselves, they'd be elevating above, they'd be maybe learning Torah all day, they'd be maybe a rabbi or someone who would be involved very much in prayer. These kind of things, maybe someone who would be considered holy. So that's good. That's already one positive quality in the realm of spirituality. But there is another quality which is not only different, but it's almost exactly the opposite. We then go on and say that the whole earth is filled with God's glory. So already, all of a sudden, something here has to be different, because what we just talked about was, so to speak, God, the God of the heavens, God as he is in the heavens. But now we're talking about God in the earth. So that has to be something different. So on the one hand, it's clearly godly, it's clearly infinite, because the whole world is filled with this thing called the glory of God. So God doesn't become finite all of a sudden. But on the other hand, the location of the discussion is down here on earth. So that's interesting. So that means there's another kind of spirituality, the glory of God, which is something which takes place down on earth. So what does that, and what is, just for anyone who's into Hebrew language, how do you see that? Why is the word kavod, which means maybe respect or sometimes dignity, or in this case glory, why is that relating to that which is happening down on earth? Because the root of the word is kaved, is the same as kaved, which means heavy. So you have on the one hand holy, which is like floating in the sky, and then you have kavod, which is heavy, which is bringing this thing down to earth. So that means that that there are two ways of relating to God, and for that matter, spirituality. One way is to look up, and to look to God and to see the godliness which is above us, which is important. But there's another thing which is very different, and I think is possibly less well known. Which is to look around you and to see the glory of God in the world. And so that's something that we need to know how to do. That's something already which is going to hopefully help us in our Rabbi Twersky mission, because this is a person who is doing his very spiritual endeavor in the physical world, in the realm of medicine, in the realm of management, in the world of work. But he was spiritual. So what he was doing, he was finding the glory of God in the mundane, worldly endeavors, in that everyday life. And I think that's something which, for me and for us, is something which we want to concentrate on, not only because we can, but because, in fact, we must. In fact, our work in creation, we have a job. We have a job in the world. Our job in the world is something called tikkun ha'olam. It's something called to rectify the world. The way that the liturgy in the Eleno prayer refers to tikkun ha'olam, it says l'taken olam b'malchut shakai, to rectify the world with the kingship of God. In other words, we need to bring God into this world. We need to see what's called the kingship of God, the malchut. We need to see that in this world. So just as a quick experiment, you just have to just have this thought experiment to yourself for a minute. You have to think to yourself, is the world around us the most godly place it could be? I think if most of us are just honest with ourselves, I think we would say no. Is the world that we see around us is not necessarily following godly values. There's all kinds of cruelty in the world. There's all kinds of, for that matter, even just the reality, the kind of the state of nature as it currently is. There's suffering in the world. So there's, from the human perspective and from the nature perspective, the world is not full of godliness. What is God? God is tachlit hatov. God is goodness. God is light. What is the world filled with? A lot of the time, it's filled with negativity. A lot of the time, we're in darkness. So we see that we actually have a job, and our job is to bring the light of God into this world. And that's basically what we want to try and focus on today. How can we do that? How can we bring the light of God into this world? How can we discover the light of God in this world? And in fact, that's actually our main job. It's actually our main job, because the fact that God is a God in the heavens, big whoop. Like that, of course God is God in the heavens. That's a perfect place for God to be. But for God to be God down on earth, for us to be able to find spirituality down on earth, for us to be able to find divine light down here, so that's huge. That's the glory of God. The fact that God is infinite. The fact that God is not just, and in His infinity, He is not limited to the realms of spirituality. That God and the glory of God should be found even down here in the spiritual world. That's something which is an even bigger mission. So this is something which we can actually not only can take upon us, but must take upon us to try and see what we can do about this. This is something that is actually, in fact, our purpose. So on the one hand, you think, who are I tell you, it's not anyone's. This is no fault other than my own. But I just tell you, when I was growing up, I used to think that the rabbis are like the real Jews, and we're like we're like the second rate, the normal people. Like they're doing the real thing. They're like really, really doing Judaism. And we're kind of like doing something, but it's not really. But to some extent, it's the exact opposite is actually true, because it's through being involved in our worlds of work, in our mundane everyday lives, that we can actually achieve this thing called bringing the glory of God into this world. The glory of God is something which people have a unique opportunity to bring to this world, being not involved, being not a rabbi, being not involved in, purely in the realm of Torah learning and prayer, which are of indeed important endeavors. That's Kedushah, that's also important. But the real mission that we have in this world is called to fill the world with the glory of God. And that's something that we, through our diverse and worldly lives, actually have the unique opportunity to do. So this is just the first thing I wanted to bring up, and really this is like kind of the mission. So this is the mission, to find and discover and in some ways bring the glory of God into this world. So with that, I'll just take a minute to pause for a second and just to ask if there are any questions or any points. Whilst there are questions, I was thinking, if anyone would feel comfortable, I would very much love if you could just type in what you do into the chat, and maybe one of the maybe Janet could collect the answers. I mean, you don't need to collect the names, but just to collect the answers, because I think if we think about what the endeavor that we're trying to do together today is to try and think how we can discover the the divine light in the everyday lives. So then I think the diversity among us is something that we can celebrate and find, oh, we're going to be able to bring light into this realm, into into the world of, let's see who's out there, into the realm of who's got one for us, into the realm. I know a couple already. I know Talia, into the realm of finance. Julian, we can at least say into the realm of linguistics and translation. Anyone else care to share? An international trade lawyer, yeah, into the realm of in law. Let's see how we can find that in law. Trinity, yeah, here we go. Brilliant. We've got some good stuff here. Also lawyer, yeah. We got Talia, of course, Trinity accountant. Anyone else? And you can also shout out from the. I know there's a contingency in the room in Granby Road. You can also shout out, or you can type whatever you like.
I've unmuted the Jane's living room if anyone wants to shout out.
Okay, hold on. Okay.
Question is
He wants first
Yeah.
to do the profession, any work that you're involved with.
Yeah, we've got a couple of accountants.
It's not a one-dimensional thing.
Right. Okay. Do you want to go?
Sure, yeah. I am an account manager.
Brilliant.
Did you get? No.
I'm a psychotherapist.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Oh, I said yours.
You've sent mine, yeah. Sort of
Interfaith.
interfaith officer type thing.
Yeah.
And then,
The consultant and the savta.
yeah, yeah, and a cultural center. We've got we've got interfaith work and cultural center work as well, of course. From there, so I think that this is just to kind of like celebrate the realms in which we'll hopefully be able to find Kavod Hashem, the glory of God. Hopefully, if we manage to work out something from this session, is the world is going to be a very different place after. There's going to be spark. We're going to be finding sparks in all different kinds of places. So thank you for that. Okay, I think John maybe had a question. Sorry, you're on mute. One sec, you're on mute again.
I'm sorry.
There
I
you go.
took it off and it went back on.
You referred to the importance of applying spirituality on earth. But what happens in practice when people have different definitions of their spirituality, and very often conflict is because of those different perceptions of what is being good. And sometimes those perceptions are very different from each other. So that's fundamentally my question.
Yeah. I think, it's obviously a huge question. I'm speaking in two ways. Number one, I'm speaking in pretty general terms already, which is going to lead to the question. And I'm also speaking at the end of the day from a Jewish perspective. Of course, there's multiple things called the Jewish perspective as well. But so I try and be as broad as I can. But still, yeah. So I'm bringing to the table certain assumptions. At the moment, I'm trying to keep it general, and hopefully with the examples we give. So that's really this is really the first chunk. In the second chunk, and what I want to do is actually go into examples of places and ways which we could find that spirituality, that divine light, and that will certainly give some of the examples of what I am talking about. Let's see if those things will be ones which are controversial. I don't know yet. Let's test it. It could be they will be. I don't know. I've tried to keep it relatively broad, but it could be they'll be controversial. So I think I'll only really be able to answer the question at the end. If you're asking a practical question, meaning I'm understanding your question as like a kind of like a fundamental or even kind of like theological one, in which case I don't really have an answer, meaning that there are different theologies out there, and I'm going to try and present what I think is something which is helpful to as many people as possible. if you're asking a practical question, then that is another thing which may relate to one of the things that we're talking about. But just how do we manage to find this balance of integrity and peace at the same time? Which is, I think, again, I'm kind of being a little cheeky by not really answering that question. But I think even just trying to have that question, you're already in better stead than probably 90% of people, because most of us are walking through the world with their own opinion, and if anyone disagrees with me, then they're wrong, or at best, and at worst, they're bad, you know. So even just to try, or the other option is to have just a complete system of subjective truth, which a lot of people find popular as well. That's difficult practically, because at the end of the day, even it clashes. It clashes in Scotland. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But subjective truths have caused a lot of fights. So it seems like, oh, then we can all have our subjective truth, but it doesn't really work. So the fact that someone is trying to find a balance to say, I understand, you believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, and I do believe that, and I do believe you're wrong. Like sometimes I honestly believe you're wrong. I believe I'm right. I believe you're wrong. But I also believe there's something called peace, and trying to make differences work. So I don't have the formula to that, but I think even just the endeavor is probably gonna push us way forward as a world if we could only have that endeavor that you're basically asking for. So that's my attempt to answer that. Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments or questions that I would like to bring up? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna put back up the sources, and I'm gonna attempt to explore 3 areas where we can try and put this endeavor into practice of finding divine light in everyday life. And as you see that, this is something, as I was, mentioning before, this is something which I have an interest in. So let's see what we can do on this collective endeavor. Okay. Okay, can people see this? Okay, so we have three sources over here. So this is the idea of the glory of God. That's the aim of the game. We're gonna try and see what we can do to discover the glory of God in these 3 following areas, in every interaction that we have with people, or even just the natural world for that matter, in every moment in the realm of time, and even in every circumstance, is whatever the situation is that we're put in, we're going to see what we can do with that. So let's look at 3 sources which can hopefully help us along the way. So the first source over here is the Rambam, Maimonides, and he is talking about the topic of Avat Hashem, of loving God. And the question is, how do you do that? How do you, there's a mitzvah in the Torah to love God, right? So that's always a tricky one. How do you obligate an emotion? That's always a question. So let's see what the Rambam has to say about that. So he says as follows. It says, "B'sha'a she'itzbonena adam b'ma'asav u'bro'av haniflaim hagdolim." And at the time that a person contemplates God's actions and his unbelievable creations, v'yira mehen, and he will see from them chokhmato, his chokhmato she'ein la erech, ve'ein locates. He will see in God's creations, i.e. in the natural worlds, God's infinite wisdom. Miyad hu ohev u'mishabeach mufa'er mitzaveh tava gedola lida Hashem agadol. He will immediately come to love and to praise and to glorify and to desire to know God. Kamosha Amar David, and just as King David said in Tehillim, in Psalms, Sama nafshi lelokim lekel chai. My soul is thirsty for God. The idea of that essentially is I should have waited to pour the glass of water for now. But what's like I'm thirsty? What's thirsty? Thirsty is this something I really want. This is not just like it's good morality to love God. It's like no, this is like This is something that I feel I need, right? So that's the place that the Rambam would hope us to be able to arrive at through this process of contemplation. So anyway, that is a big discussion in and of itself. But we really just want to go to the core of the Rambam and see what is he talking about behind the scenes. So what essentially the Rambam Maimonides is talking about over here is the infinite wisdom of God, which is in his creations, that we should be able to go around the world and take a walk and look around and look at the plants that you see around you. Look at, it depends where you can, if you're in Edinburgh, you can see a mountain. There's a mountain you can see from most parts of the city, pretty good. You can see animals. If you go to the zoo, even on the street, we saw a cool pigeon, which had like interesting coloration on the street, me and my kids the other day. So we were enjoying looking at that pigeon. And you just imagine like walking around the world and seeing that there's infinite wisdom in every single thing which exists. And for this matter, one of the things which is cool about this is that the more you know about the science of it, so then actually the more you're going to be able to appreciate it, because you appreciate, if you just think animal's an animal, okay, good. But if you actually understand the intricacies of, what does it take for a bird to fly? Like imagine like the physics and biology which goes into making a bird fly. How about the fact that their voice is like pleasing, you typically quite pleasing to listen to. Birds more than any other animals typically have talk about bird song, have quite an enjoyable noise, sound, voice. And just to think for a second, like imagine if the more you understand and appreciate the intricacies of it, the more you can just be blown away by just this is something special which is going on here. So basically, every walk down the street can become something quite amazing, and for that, and that's just the natural world. But when you come to the human being, so there's even more than that. So the Kabbalah, the Jewish esoteric tradition, so it splits it's almost like taxonomy. It splits the levels or categories of life into 4 levels. So the first one is what's called domem, which is inanimate or non-living things. So that's like that could be your Arthur seat, or that's the plants, or excuse me, that's not the plants, that's the earth, or even the bricks, all the non-living things that you're interacting with. Then moving up from that, you have tzomeach, which is plant life. Vegetation, so that's all that. The trees, the plants, all that different, all those different things. And then moving up from that, you have what's called chai, which is animal life. And then above this, that's what we've talked about already. And then you have something else, which is they call medaber, which means humanity. So in humanity, you don't only have the wisdom of God, but you actually have the image of God. What does it mean, the image of God? Obviously, the incredibly long discussion to get to the bottom of such a thing. But one of the things that it means is that we have in us what's called a godly soul. We have what's a nefesh elokit, a godly soul within us. And that means that we are able to change the world in all kind of different ways. But if you now think about it, what it means to walk down the street and not just look at the things around, but just look at the people around you, walk down the street and see who you're interacting with. You're interacting with someone who has a divine spark inside them. It's pretty amazing before you even meet the personality, which again is, we had a psychotherapist on the call, from the personality perspective, already we get into unbelievable realms. But even just to that this is a human being, you're seeing something pretty unfathomable, really. And the word neshama, which is the word for soul, one of the words for soul in the Torah, is from the word neshima, which means a breath, because every soul is a breath of God. So people are walking around with the breath of God inside them. It's an unbelievable thing. So if you just imagine yourself walking, if we could internalize this idea, we'd struggle to get to work every day, even though that's what we're going to try and do eventually. We're going to try and get to work. But in the meantime, we're going to be distracted by a lot of amazing things. Every single plant that you see, you see a bird, every single human being that you see should be an inspiration. It should be an inspiration to us. So this is out on the streets, this is in the everyday life. and you have the wisdom of God, and as we're adding in from the more esoteric sources, the image of God, which is in a spiritual sense, which is kind of like going around the world at every moment. So this is the first thing. So in every interaction, when you're interacting with people or even non-living, or even plants and even non-living things, there's an interaction with divine light, which is going on there. There's an interaction with the glory of God, which is to be found there. So, I did this, when these are all things that you have to work on. They're not necessarily something that you can just kind of, snap your fingers and achieve in a moment. But, I have done this sometimes. I, walk around and you just allow yourself. It's quite hard to allow yourself contemplation time these days. Obviously depends on your generation to some extent, but with smartphones are amazing. I'm very grateful for smartphones. I use them for very good things, but one of the big downsides is that I can just never pay attention to the world, basically, because I could always do something, always be very productive, walking in the street or anything, and I can miss the world. And if I'm missing the world, I'm missing the glory of God. So that's it's like a note to self. Sometimes you've got to put away the phone and see what's out there. So that's one thing that we want to discuss over here. Okay. Any kind of questions or points on this one over here?
Is it just that a lot of people said in COVID, that's when they stopped again to look at the world?
Yeah. It's there's that's another thing we could talk about, which we're not really, but again, kind of like the spiritual silver lining idea of that there's a a positive in every negative, and obviously overall a very, very negative thing, but there were sparks of light to be found in that too, and that could definitely be one of them. Yeah, I think it's something to think about. I should also say, by the way, it's quite interesting that the big phenomenon around where I live is a question of what they call kosher phones, right? So I used to laugh at this because there was a line from a big rabbi that said, "Would you want me to eat my phone?" But kosher phone basically means like a phone with only calling, no internet, no texting, no nothing, just calling. So basically, it means you use your phone less. Basically, so it's quite interesting that I've tried it. I'm not yet ready to kind of like embrace it fully. I have to use phones for other things, but I would love to be able to rise to that level one day where like the phone is for calling again, and then everything else is like real. And even calling, even like not even texting, like even the phone interaction which you have with someone is like it's like a relatively real thing. It would be so pluses and minuses, but you can see a big plus which could be achieved, and that it's kind of like regaining that relationship with the world around you. So that's one thing that we want to think about. Okay, so this is one thing in terms of interactions. Now let's move to the realm of time, because that's kind of like in the realm of entities. So in different things in the world, we can have an experience of divinity. What about in the realm of time? So this is really interesting. I think also it's a little bit of a plus. We're not bashing technology this session. We are here in the merits of technology. I'm on one side of the world, you're on the other. But there are certain footnotes, and one of those things is that with the advancement of technology, not just over the past couple of decades, but over the past hundreds of years, we've moved to a place where we don't really think about time as much, because the world is kind of let's talk about day and night, right? So from a sleep canceling perspective, it's something that I think about. And day and night used to be, when I once spent a few nights in rural villages in South Africa, and they didn't really they had like a little bit of electricity, but not much. And nighttime was nighttime, like it was really, really nighttime. It was like dark. There's like nothing to do. So you really felt time, you felt the difference between day and night. Now you can get away pretty much without really feeling the difference between day and night. You've got, you've got your, never mind from electric lights, but you've got your phones, you've got your screens, you've got shift work, you've got everything, which basically, I have a lot of friends here who work American hours, or in Israel work American hours. So Time is almost appears to become a little irrelevant, but let's see why that is very it could be a very negative thing. So let's see. So the Dat Tivunat, which is the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato, whose yard site was last week, by the way, so it says as follows. So Minei Hashpa'ot Rabot, Chidesh Ha'adon Baruch Hu, Lashpia al Briotav. God has created many different kinds of bestowals of divine energies that he wanted to bestow upon his creations. Hashba'ot, miyuchadot, b'chol bria, karoila, and different bestowals for the different creations which were the things which they needed. In other words, that we all have different needs, even in a spiritual sense. We all have different needs, and in terms of the life that we're being given, we all have different kind of qualities and quantities of different things that we need, and God thinks about that, and He bestows in a constant way to us the different things that we need in life. However, there's another level. So aside from this, Gazar Hekef Sivuvei Hekef Sivuvi L'chol Minei Hashba'ot Ha'ela. He also created a cycle of all of these bestowals. Liot Sholtim B'Sivuv Al Haolam. That they would have each kind of energy that God has given to the world would have its time of being the main energy that is going on in the world. Sheyeh Seder Shlitatam U'Pu'ulatam Keseder Sivu Azman, such that the order of their ruling, meaning their being the primary energies in the world and their functionality, would cycle according to time. So what is the Ramchal saying over here? Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato, what's he saying over here? What he's saying is that different times have different energies. So there's no such thing as, I say I like it, I'm a man of efficiency, or at least I like efficiency. So, I want to make things exactly the same every single day. I mean, it's never like that, but in theory, I like to make things exactly the same every single day, and on a weekly schedule and a daily schedule, and that's what I like. But that's not what God likes. That's not what God likes. God does a different thing. He gives you different energies every single day. He gives you different energies every single month, year, every single moment, because there are different needs which we have as individuals, and there are different timely needs. There are different times which require different things that we should be doing. And so God bestows those particular energies at those particular times. And so some times are what's the word I'm looking for? Are like, it's not appropriate, it's not a better word than that. Sometimes are particularly like fitting for certain kinds of activities, and sometimes others. I'll just give you an example right now. So for example, the season that we're in right now, so it's Jewish Culture Month, which by the way is what? Is the month of May, or is okay, so we just started a new Jewish month, which is the month of Sivan, where we just started that month a couple of days ago, and the time, especially this month of Sivan, in this early part of the month, is, let's just check over here. Oh, covers the month of Sivan. Amazing. Okay, well, let's see if this fits with what the Kabbalah says. So what is the energy of this time? The energy is that of what's called Masorah, which means the tradition, but it means passing on from generation to generation. That is the energy which is going on at this time. That partly relates to, because this month is the month of the giving of the Torah, which is the time when God took the Torah from heaven and brought it down to earth, which is the paradigm for education between the generations for all of the rest of history. So this is also time. So for it's a certain time where, for example, a certain special time to pray for your children and for their education and things like that. So, there's different times of the year which are kind of, which are, the word in Hebrew, the word I'm trying to use is masugal. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in with a good English translation of masugal, but certain times which are particularly appropriate, fitting, high energy for certain things. So that's one example, and there are many, many examples. This is really the idea also of the festivals. The festivals are not just commemorations of past events, but they're actually tapping into present energies which are different at those different times of the year. So that's a whole thing in itself. We could talk about what exact energy attaches to which exact festival. But what we're basically coming out of here with is the idea that no 2 days are the same. No 2 days are the same. So we have an opportunity to, to interact with different divine energies at particular times, at any particular time. So that requires us to kind of, keep our eyes open, keep our minds open. So, what's the energy? What's the energy of this day? What's the energy of this week, of this month? And with that, to know that there's no staleness, there's no routine, really. Again, not so good for a sleep specialist to say, but there's no routine. There's no routine. It's different. We have to be ready to do different things at different times. And so that's one of the ways that we can tap into the everyday life in the realm of time, is that, everyday life isn't so every day. It's different, and we should be ready for different things each day. And that's part of the divine energies which are existing on every single day. So that's another thing that we want to think about. So anyone have any points I'd like to discuss on divine light in the realm of time? Yeah.
Could I just quickly say, I learned with my son Andrew, alav shalom, that my philosophy became that the routine is to learn to know that the unexpected will come. So that was part of daily living.
Yeah.
And that became the routine of daily living.
It's good takes, but yeah, the expectation is the unexpected. That's cool. Yeah, you can have a routine as long as your routine is to be ready for anything. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else want to bring up any? Yeah, Gillian, please. Yeah.
To that, another layer, and
I
that's
think
the identity associated with those different energies should be linked to some overall objective or visualization about what you're trying to do. It somehow justifies those variations in energies, rather than saying that the cause is the effect, that, there is some sort of absolute energy and you just have to follow it, rather than thinking that, there's these different energies, but that's because they contribute to a totality of objective.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah. So, and then we didn't. Thanks very much for bringing that up. So the two main objectives, of course, there's many. You could subdivide the objectives in many ways, but the two main objectives that we think about in life are as follows. Number one is what we mentioned already: is tikkun olam, is to bring the world to a better place, to a better state. It's to make the world a better place, and in that sense of making the world a better place, there's different. Fascinatingly, it's not just do the same thing all the time. It's actually different things which are needed at different times to bring the world to a better state. And the other is on the individual level, is self-perfection, is self-improvement, self-development, personal growth. And is our job really that's our job in the world, is to do two things: to try and make the world a better place and to try and make ourselves better people. That's kind of what it is. So, one outward looking and one inward looking, but all of them are growth oriented. And that we should try and contribute to the growth of the world, and we should be trying to, make sure that we are growing as individuals as well. And if that's the case, so then that's what we should kind of like look for, as John saying, very helpful. That's kind of your overarching goal, which is, how can I improve myself today, or how can I make the world a better place today? And with that, then you can be open to, okay, well, I guess this is the task I'm going to focus on today, vis-a-vis myself. This is the task I'm going to focus on today, vis-a-vis the world. Of course, just, to mention, of course, the main way to make the world a better place is to make yourself a better person, because then the world is a better place because you're in it. So that's, there's different ways to make the world a better place. It doesn't always involve being very public. You can be even just, by yourself. It doesn't involve you having status or kind of particular recognition or anything like that. We can always do that on our own level. I think I see another. Okay, Gillian, I think you wanted to mention
I don't know whether I'm taking you back a bit because I think that this particular question has moved us forward and moves us on. And I'm not sure whether to take you back, but I just wanted to go back to what Jane said and what I was thinking about when you were talking about, every day is different and living with unpredictability, Jane. Um, it can be really very stressful. I mean, no matter how much we open ourselves to learning coping mechanisms, as I'm sure both of you know from the work you're doing now, that living with uncertainty and unpredictable change and finding a framework to uh, to grow through it can be really tough personally. And it basically is very unsettling. And if you have, if you're in your own home, but when you're like, if you lose, it's like watching people who have to emigrate, and stuff like that. When you cut off the roots to find yourself, to make the space in your mind for what's coming ahead and to learn how to set new priorities and stuff like that. I mean, it's an enormous challenge to most people. And I think that the comment that just came up through was really about seeing it as a visualizing, envisaging it as a way of growing to learn to cope. It's really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that it's not just that it's something to work with, which you like to survive or to cope with. That is level one because that's not easy. Just to cope with the uncertainty and the anxiety which can come with that. So that is certainly level one is to cope. You've got to stay alive. Stage one. But then, if you can manage to bring that into growth, that's huge, and that's a huge growth point. Like I'll definitely say myself, like to to be able to be ready to go with uncertainty. I'm still working on it. I think it's probably a lifelong mission because it's so different levels of uncertainty which can come in as well. But it's for sure a growth point. For that matter, we just started the book of Bamidbar in our kind of yearly reading of the Torah, Bamidbar, in the which is numbers, but basically it's all about our journeys in the wilderness, in the desert, post Exodus from Egypt, pre-entry to the land, 40 years of journeys. And that's part of the growth which was going on there. What's the point of the 40 years? So one of the deeper idea of the point of that was that we didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. Some days you would stay in the same place. God would tell you when to move on. Some days you would stay in the same place for one day. Some days you would stay in the same place for 2 years. You didn't know what was going to be the next day, and that's part of the growth. We needed to grow at that time, and part of the growth was how do you grow to a person who can work with the uncertainty, whether you want to call it faith or resilience, whatever you want to call it. That's a growth point. Yeah, that would relate to that. Okay, so and let's see, but it does definitely. Yeah, was there another? Yeah, another question over here. Just to take yourselves off mute.
Yeah, I think I take the point very much about the unexpected and dealing with uncertainty. And for me, the passage in Ecclesiastes about there being a time for so many different things, I think that I read that very much as being about unexpected events, unexpected times and occurrences, and that we need to be prepared in a sense to respond in very different ways depending on circumstances.
Yeah.
For me, the passage given us here is not so much about that as I read it as being about almost structured change. So it's saying that just as in the sequence of Torah readings during the course of a year, the whole range is covered, so that you're not dealing with the same theme over and over again. And the same with the festivals. The festivals, whichever faith we're part of, our festivals take us through different themes, different emotions, different experiences, different memories, all of those things. But that's all structured. and it's to enable us then to have a holistic view. I think it's partly what John was saying earlier on, that if we don't have that structure, that sequence over time, and that thematic sequence, then we end up, the danger is that we end up focusing on our pet ideas or our pet responses, and we don't develop that holistic approach. I think also of the in the Hindu faith, where there's this idea of the 4 stages of life, and within those 4 there would be subdivisions in a way, but you begin as the student, so you are learning, you're discovering all the time. You then become the householder, so you live in the world very much. You know what you were saying, Isaac, at the very beginning. You find the glory of God in the world and in just going about your daily life. Then you come to a stage where you are beginning to withdraw from that, but you're still very much in the world, but you're beginning to withdraw. And then at the end, you go and become a forest dweller, and that is your time for meditation. And it's not saying that you don't do any of those things in any of the other stages, because of course you do, but it's saying that there are appropriate ways of living at different times of life. And so it's structured. You know what's coming in a sense, and that then helps you to meet the unexpected and to face uncertainty, because your structure has given you the inner resources to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think probably this in some ways brings us to the final source, because probably the honest truth is that the source that we just saw from the Ramchal he talked about cycles. So he is probably talking about those energies over time, which can be expected. But then, what was brought up in terms of the unexpected, maybe that'll even bring us just into our final source over there. So you're right, we're definitely working with both, and each is going to have its role. So that was a great point in terms of bringing it up. I just want to share again for our final source, which says as follows. We here are back all the way to Tanakh, and we are in the book of Esther, Megillat Esther, where the story at this stage is trying to be as direct as possible. You have Esther and Mordechai are the two main characters. Esther is a young woman who is in the house of the king. There has been a genocidal decree against the Jews, and she is undercover at this stage. She is not revealed that she is a Jew. But she is the queen. She is in the king's in the household of the ones who at the end of the day rubber stamped this decree, and it's time to see if she is going to be able to save the day. So what is you have to almost forget the rest of the story for now and see, is this a young woman who is terrified and has a lot on her shoulders. This is what Mordechai, who's her sort of adoptive father, manages to say to her as follows. He says, if you stay silent at this time, the Jews will be saved in some shape or form, in some other way. You and your father's house will perish. Meaning the decree at the moment is, they're all meant to go. So the ones that we know meant to go. Somehow God will work out a way. He'll work out a way for there to be some kind of survival in some shape or form, but it won't be you. But he says, but listen to this, and this line completely changed my life. Is who knows if it was for this moment that you were put in the position of the royal household. And this is the question, this is our task really, is if we can try and ask this question to ourselves every day, is who knows, is it, God has his ways of working out things in the world, but what's your job, and what's your job in any particular moment? And this is the sort of the divine light in the realm of the decision. So this really can run with you at any circumstance that you're in, whether you're, dealing with easy people, dealing with difficult people, dealing with a happy time or dealing with the sad time, dealing with something cyclical or something unexpected. And the question that we can ask ourselves at that time is, when I feel like, I think maybe I should be somewhere else right now, but you're not somewhere else. So you're here. So who knows if it was for this exact interaction I was here, having a business meeting with someone, I think I'm meant to be selling them a course, maybe, or maybe I'm meant to, well, who knows what I'm meant to be doing in this one. Maybe I'm meant to smile at someone. You don't know how much that can change someone's day. Story after story of people who've noted that they were in a very, very dark place, and someone said hello and how are you to them, and it changed everything. And who knows, so you think you're in the world for one thing. Maybe you're in the world to discover that divine light within nature, discover that divine light within human beings, to see what energies you can be working with at every moment and in any circumstance, with certainty or uncertainty. This is a question that we can ask ourselves. Who knows if it was for this moment that I was placed exactly here? So there's always going to be that divine light. That's the one that we don't know. We don't know what we're asked to do in that circumstance. We don't know what we're asked to be, but we hope to be open-minded to the fact that God wants something of me. He's placed light in this circumstance for me. My job is to find the light. So that's something that we can, I think, in our realms of law, in our realms of accounting, be they trainee or retired for that matter, and psychotherapy and the other jobs which were mentored over here. I think this is a way where we can realize that spirituality is not just to be found in the heavens, but it's to be found right here on the earth. Holiness is something which is very important, but our job is really to work on the glory of God and to bring the glory of God into our everyday diverse lives. Okay, that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Isaac. Should I see if there are any questions that haven't been answered along the way? And if people at this point feel that they can put on their screens, it's always nice to speak to people's faces. If you can't, that's fine too. So I'm just going to give other people a chance, just in case. Is anybody? Okay, we've got a quieter audience today. Then I'm going to give John the last question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't think it was the last question, but
well, hold on. There you go, John.
Anyway, I love
John is just sorry. Atalia is a trainee accountant, and John, who's about to ask a question, is a very experienced. I think maybe technically retired, but you can, if we need to make a consultation, we can do so. Anyway, there you go.
I'm on the national board of my institute and participate in various political issues at the moment, but that's not really what I want. First of all, I love the point about the importance of speaking out and, of course, choosing those moments. And it's a battle I personally have almost every day of my life. But just picking out one or two, almost like illustrations, I often find myself asking people if they want to join certain boards. And one of the many things which distresses me is, while they may have huge contributions prior to attending the board, they often don't make contributions when they're on the board. And the reasons why is because they're feeling intimidated. So I almost leave that as an observation, which can be very frustrating. Second point is that there is almost like a presumption that the majority view is the true view. And I find, as often is the case, that some individual or tiny minority come up with some brilliant and appropriate ways forward. And I don't altogether understand that, but it's often the case in practice. And the third point, which somehow is also in this mix worthy of mention, I think, is what you could possibly distinguish between intelligence and wisdom. And very often there are some very clever people who fall back on regulations. Regulations about this, regulations about that, rather than the visionary points about, well, those are the regulations, but that doesn't actually fit this situation. So I'm just throwing that into the mix, that you can't fall back on regulations, and very often the dynamic is to how to manage change where regulation or prior scenarios just do not fit. So I'll leave those observations.
Yeah, I'll share just maybe one reflection, but I think that just in terms of the regulation point, I think one of the things which is, I guess, as you were kind of tapping into, especially from that last thing, is there's something called bechira, something called choice, free choice, or kind of like active choice, and that is, in many ways, the most central thing that we have in our lives and that we have in this world, and the one of the things I do think there's an importance of rules. There is a rule for rules, but sometimes rules can be an almost kind of a subconscious exemption from using our powers of choice, and we just need to make sure that we are not, taking things for a given if they're not right. If it really, really has to be, then okay, then you have to do as much as you can do within the rules. But we need to make sure this is, I'm kind of like, I'm kind of speaking because this is more my natural mood. I don't know, I'm not sure. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But sometimes like, okay, it's the rules, so just leave it. And then I'll just speak out for my mom, who's the opposite. Who is like, what do you mean the rules are the rules? Let's change the rules. And I think, it has to be, I think, there's a balance. There's two midot in this world. There's two kinds of, what was I going to say? Two main characteristics. One is called chesed and one is called gevura. So gevura means strength, which means structure and rules, and chesed means sort of unbound kindness, and it's the balance between those that we have to try and strike in life. So yeah, just one reflection on that, but there could be more. Yeah, well, the rule breaker.
Yeah. Think that I just break rules for the sake of it, but you're absolutely right. And one just will maybe end on my example of we were in a very structured situation. We were in a hospital in intensive care with the head nurse, and things were very strict, like can't have more than 2 people in the room, can't bring your phones in the room, and it was all incredibly hard. When someone's very, very ill. And one of the head nurse said to me, go and have a cup of tea, Jane, while, I just turn over your son. You just go and have a cup of tea, then you come back. And I came back and I started walking to a room, and she said, no, 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 no. Andrew's in a different room. And I said, what? She said, look, the rules weren't working. So we've changed the room and there are no rules now. And I said to her, but how? That's amazing, because of course I was a bit worried because I wanted the best care for him. And she said, no, I'm the head nurse, and sometimes the rules are meant to change. And I thought, that's fantastic. She's got the courage, even in a head position, to know this wasn't working for the people that it needed to work for, and she found a way to change it. And so I maybe conclude on that, because it was just such an important lesson for me to learn. And it's all about, isn't it, the different things, the structured things, the things that are unexpected, the expected but changeable things, and the confidence to think, who am I doing this for? Am I running the hospital for the hospital, or am I running the hospital for the patient?
Yeah.
Brilliant. If I don't, I'll just say one line, just because that brings us back to Rabbi Twersky, which is, I think now we can start to see how a person of utmost spirituality could be able to operate in the everyday world. Imagine if we were able to achieve these levels to look around the world and be inspired by the things that we see, the people that we meet, see that different times have different energies, and every moment is a new opportunity. So I think that that there's absolutely no contradiction anymore between spirituality and everyday life, and to the contrary, it's a higher level. It's harder. It may be easy to find spirituality in the synagogue. It's harder to find spirituality in the world, but that at the end of the day is our goal. So I'm excited to try and take this mission together.
Thank you, Isaac. I'm going to go quickly over to Gillian for a vote of thanks.
This is amazing. I don't know what to add, or to even like a little frill on the side of all these wonderful things that we've shared today about tapping into the world as it is and finding our place in it and our potential, the value and the potential that we all have. You've shown us so many different dimensions to our own lives in these different mirrors, the 4 mirrors that you've brought to give us, like, I don't know, a breath of fresh air. It's 11:30 at night, and it's not that I feel wide awake. I feel like something has just gone through my entire mind and cleared everything up after a whole day of being bogged down in things. I hope you all feel the same. I can't speak really for everybody else, can I? But I could say that was really something that I want to take with me tonight, and I want to take it with me because it does give, as you say, a balance to the way we view our lives, we view our place in the world, and how we can fit and how we can maybe change. I mean, I've always felt as a linguist that, I have a purpose to help people communicate and transfer meaning and all the rest of the stuff. But this was just like really, really big, really major. And it comes with a lot of spirituality. It's very encouraging for ordinary people, for people who sometimes don't want to overthink it. Thank you so much, Isaac. Thank you, Janet and Jane, for pulling this together and for